Pet the Bunny is a really great episode of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is the 4th episode of season 7. It's directed by John Fortenberry, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. This starts off with Ray and Debra in the kitchen with the children, and Robert comes in. It's a really lovely, sweet scene with interactions between the kids and their Uncle Robert, and they've drawn a picture, and Ray's not in the picture, so Robert's rather happy and wants to keep the picture, so he lifts it up, and Ray has a comment about Robert's bolts being missing, and yeah, he'd make a pretty good Frankenstein's creature. And then they realise that there's something on the back of the paper. They got the paper from Ray's office, and on the back is something that looks like a eulogy for Frank. And it turns out Ray, while writing something similar for somebody else, just started doodling down ideas to see what he might want to say about Frank when the time comes. And I can confirm, as a writer, that kind of thing is like doodling. I've never written a eulogy for anybody, but certainly just playing with words and having fun with it is, I can imagine what it feels like if you're an artist, an illustrator, and you doodle down pictures. It's the same, but with words. So I don't think that what Ray did, from my perspective, is that strange. I don't think it's that bizarre. I don't think there's anything too deep into it, but Robert is clearly having a lot of fun with this. Particularly when we find out that the kids gave the other drawings to Marie and Frank. And Ray's reaction is brilliant. He screams, he runs across the road. It is a fabulous moment. Marie and Frank are just sitting calmly at the kitchen, eating. There is no indication that they have any idea that Ray had written a eulogy for Frank. And Ray sees one of the pictures on the freezer door. It's been stuck to the door. And he asks Marie for some food. She gets him some food. Then she gets some fudgesicles out of the freezer door. And it was beautifully executed. The door opens. Ray's standing behind it. The door closes. The picture is gone. It was so swift and so sleek. And I really thoroughly enjoyed that quite a lot. And it seems like he's got away with it. So he crumples it up. He's about to leave. And Frank notices that he has one of the children's pictures. And Ray tries to pretend that he's just going to get it framed. And Frank points out that you don't frame things that are not very good. He says it in his own ways, of course. And Frank takes the picture back and storms out of the room. And I love the exchange. It's so well written. What happens next, I think, is so brilliant. Frank leaves the room and Marie says to Ray, he doesn't have it. To which Ray responds, what? And Marie replies, the picture you're looking for. And it turns out that obviously she had seen the eulogy and she wasn't concerned. All she said was, where's mine? Which I absolutely loved. And Ray tried to pretend that writing Marie's eulogy would just be too heartbreaking. And her response to that, I'd like to see something by Wednesday. Which I just thought was a fantastic and very believable response from Marie as well. Of course she wants to hear Raymond saying all of these nice things about her. And if this is the only way he's going to do it, then I guess she wants to hear it. And I thought that was quite sweet in her own ways, I guess. Ray and Debra are then discussing it in the bedroom. Ray tells this story about how he once saw Frank petting Hoppy, the bunny, Ray's pet bunny, as a child. And Debra tells Ray that he needs to tell Frank that he saw this really nice moment. And Ray's response was fabulous. He just replies, are you new here? Which I love it. And he's got a point. I don't know why Debra would ever have thought that Frank would want to hear that. And we're then at the breakfast table. And Frank comes in. He's won $20 on the lottery. He's got more scratchers and they're busy doing those. And Debra basically hits Ray until he brings up the bunny story. And it's very clear, as one would expect, that Frank does not want to hear this. And he ends up storming out and calling Ray a liar. It never happened. He storms out, he slams the door, the curtain falls. I don't know if that was intentional. I don't know if they'd maybe loosened the bolt or the screw or whatever it is so that it would fall easily, or if it genuinely was just a set malfunction that they left in. But either way, I loved it. I thought it worked very, very well. And clearly he's unhappy about this. And sometime later, they go over to drop the kids off at Marie and Frank's because they're babysitting, and Frank comes into the room. He's still not happy. And then the guys from the lodge come over with a toy bunny. And this is where I think things went, not within the episode, but for Frank, I think it's clear that things did go too far. I think this is what he was concerned about. If you talk about it, other people are going to find out. If you never mention it, he can pretend it never happened. And clearly this is what Frank didn't want to happen. And I do think that while this was obviously never Ray's intention with bringing up the story, it has gone too far. The bunny toy was absolutely adorable, though. And obviously this is not a big deal. He doesn't want people to make a big deal out of the bunny story. And then somebody asks, well, why would Ray put it in your eulogy? And I think I'd genuinely forgotten for a moment that Frank had not even been aware of the eulogy. And I think that reaction is valid. I think his overreaction to hearing the bunny story is completely unacceptable. But to hear somebody's written a eulogy about you, even when that person is a writer and to them it is just like doodling, just playing with words, it's still going to feel a little bit awkward. If somebody told me, I've written your eulogy, yeah, I'd be concerned. Not that I think they're going to kill me, but I would be genuinely concerned about why they felt the need to think of me dead. And again, I'm saying that as somebody who does play with words, and I don't think it's a big deal, but if somebody said that to me, that they'd done that, I think I might react like Frank. I would leave. I'd leave the room. I'd be very confused. And Ray goes after him, of course, and they have a lovely conversation. And Ray basically says some things that Frank actually likes to hear, and ultimately Frank concludes that maybe Ray can keep the bunny story in. He's not sure. Ray can just surprise him, which I love because obviously he'll not really have a say in the matter when it actually comes time to delivering the eulogy. And it was a nice scene. I think the scene could have been a little bit longer, and I never say that. I basically never say that a scene should be longer. Especially in Raymond. I feel like in Raymond, there are a lot of episodes where we only have 2 or 3 scenes. And that's not a criticism. They tend to work really well. But it's very unusual for me to say that any scene, particularly in Raymond, should be longer. But I think that conversation between Frank and Ray, I think should have had a little bit more to it. It did feel a little bit rushed. But what we got, ultimately where it ended up, I thought was still really satisfying. And we end the episode with Robert giving Marie her eulogy, and she says to him, "That's so very nice, but Raymond is the writer." So obviously Robert, not happy with this, decides to start writing Raymond's eulogy instead. And I think it's fair to say that in the moment at least he's going to delight in thinking of his brother's demise, which doesn't sound like a jolly way to end an episode, but it was quite fun. Obviously I think we have a great look at Frank's character here and different sides to him, and indications, not for the first time of course, that he does have a softer, gentler side, and he does have this wall up in front of him, not necessarily because that's who he wants to be, but because that's who he thinks society needs him to be. It's a version of himself that he thinks he needs to project, and I think it's always quite nice when we get to see this softer side of Frank. It's a solid episode, really great moments, highlights Ray's reaction when he found out that the kids had given Marie the other pictures with the rest of the eulogy, and the curtain falling down, regardless of whether or not it was intentional. I really enjoyed it. The comment about Robert needing the bolts in his neck, anything Frankenstein will make me smile, and I think, I guess the scene with Ray and Frank at the end is a bit of a highlight. As I said, I do think it could have been longer, and I almost never ask for that, but the dialogue that we did get was well written and well delivered. So I guess that can be a highlight. In general, Pet the Bunny is a really sweet, certainly very thought-provoking, definitely funny, but also very moving episode of Everybody Loves Raymond.